Um, it will be one of our slave officers for the 25-26 murder year. An email sent out and had a list of those. I've also placed that list on each table. So at this time, if there are no objections, someone wants to make a motion to approve the state of officers. Thank you. And a second by Jim Waters. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Very good. So thank you for doing that. Now, and if you wouldn't be joining me in the pledge. Thank you, Steve. It looks like Lenny is ready to announce our guest.
Good morning. Good morning. We have a visiting Rotarian. Welcome back, Paul Rose from Lovejoy. Paul. And our speaker today is Jim Finnegan, and we'll hear more about him shortly.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for our guest. Last 6 years or 6 months.
I don't think that's you.
And now, do we have any dollars? Karen, do you want me to come?
I have two happy dollars. The first one today, I am brand owner of a new used car. And the second one, I just wanted to thank everybody who reached out, cards, text, phone calls, Bob and frequently sent orchid, things like that during my father's illness and recent past. It's very much appreciated by myself and the
Look at that. I wonder why. Mr. Smith. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I have $2.5, and it's because the first time I ever went to a police officer swearing in event, which especially at the event is past weekend, is very symbolic. So, Todd, you can just stand for a second, please. Todd did the ceremony at the township supervisor meeting, and I was there with friends. And it was their son that was getting inducted. I'll say took the oath, and I was just very impressed with how Todd handled it. His professionalism, his support, his commitment to our community, giving support and keeping us safe every day in, day out. So $2 for Todd and Spring for keeping us safe and bring great people into our community, the officers. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Anyone else? Okay. If not, we'll move on to announcements for this morning. Does anybody have any announcements? Share? Do I need to come to you?
I use the outside voice.
Well,
Thank you. I got a call yesterday from Turkey where Bonnie Spark was attending a peace conference for Rotary. And she said, there's a couple checks that will back up the Poinsettia fundraiser for the upcoming October humanitarian mission. So I'm presenting them to Chris Izzo today. I give them to you to give him. So it's, two checks for over $750, and she says that's enough to, pay for somebody's, trip to the mission. And Vicki can tell you a little bit more about the mission.
This mission comes up the last week of October. We typically have had folks, doctors, assistants, volunteers from Denmark, all over the place, South America. Oh my goodness, many countries in Africa. The Brazilians have been right with us, all of this. And of course, all of us here in the USA. We're very happy that someone from this club is going to go with us, and that money is to pay for their airfare. Because it is a 2-day trip to get there, where we're going to go. Uganda, the Windy, it is on the western side of Uganda, a beautiful country. We're going to be working in a hospital there that's new. And so we'll be bringing dentists, medical doctors, eye doctors, and we try to make this grow so we can offer more to these folks who have such great needs. So, but thank you for buying poinsettias, and late October we'll be ready. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Anyone else, any other announcements to be made? I think I'll say this as I'm walking back up here. Members of the membership and public relations committee, we're going to have a meeting immediately following this meeting to talk about the other seats that are on your table. And this is our final week of gathering names, and I want to thank everyone for providing names of potential Rotarians. I think our list might be at 86, which is a fantastic number. Now, we only have names. We now have to add these people if they want to come and join us, and then follow through with all of that. So that's a little bit of what our meeting is going to be about this morning. If anyone has any interest, and you're not on the membership or public relations committee, and you want to stick around to just help us figure out how we go about that process, we will. So I do still have the sheets on the table. I know I've been beating you up the last 3 weeks about getting this names. If you have anyone else to add, please feel free to do so. It's not like we have to end this thing right now. We honestly need to think about this as we keep going forward forever. We want to make it a focus to focus on this membership drive, and that's why those sheets are put out there. So if you have anything to add, feel free to, we'll take those and we'll add them to that list that we have. Anyone have anything else? No? If not, Mr. Girash, are you going to do the introductions here?
Morning. Morning. Our speaker is Jim Finnegan. He is with the what I think of as the Chessie freight rail system, and he has an interesting position in the rail system. He's not an engineer. He is with the police department, and we're going to hear all about ways in which people break the law through well, stealing things, for one example, from freight rail, but has tremendous previous experience with the federal police officer group at the Pentagon, and as a police officer in Philadelphia, and has a lot of experience throughout his career here in training others. In addition to that, he has a military service, recently commissioned an officer in charge of naval security forces in Texas, has a degree in criminal justice, and is now working on a degree in occupational safety and health. He's married, he has 3 children, whom he's very proud of, and he is a member of our local Masons organization, in addition to all the other people. Jim Finnegan.
Thanks for having me. Breakfast was awesome. There's a couple of familiar faces in the crowd that I know from around the community. So what I have on the screen here is Operation Lifesaver. It's basically to teach people about safety on the railroad, how not to go on the railroad tracks, how not to get hit by a train, and how not to stop on a crossing and things like that. But also, as Bill said, I also have a unique position within the railroad, being a special agent. So my title is Supervisory Special Agent. I oversee the Baltimore field office and the K9. And I'm also on the railroad. I'm also a drone pilot, and I do executive protection. So I have been with the railroad now 19 years. Prior to that, as they said, I did a short stint at the Pentagon Police Department. I found out that federal police work is regular uniform police work is not for me. And then prior to that, I was a Philadelphia city cop for about 4 years in the 9th District of Center City, Philadelphia area. But as I said, I've been a canine handler most of my career, and I've been with the railroad for 19. So we could go through this PowerPoint a little bit, but there's a couple of big points that I wanted to first off, how many people in the room have ever heard of the railroad? Does anybody know that the railroad has at least a couple of people in the room? So we've been in existence since the 1800s, when originally, like a lot of the railroad towns were, they were basically that. They were railroad towns. So the railroad was getting built, or it may have been coal industry or some other big industry that really didn't have police was there. So the railroad hired security, most notably the Pinkerton Guard. You would have heard that in history and things like that, where they were kind of ruthless. They were like heavy-handed. They'd go in and just beat people up and do things like that. But they were also notorious for doing good investigations and coming up with they could stop train robberies and honestly things like that. But the railroad police were set up in a lot of towns as the police force for that area until it was actually established and became had its own organization. Let's go through a couple of the slides here, but people are shot and killed by trains pretty often, whether it be in a vehicle or just walking down the tracks. In York, Pennsylvania, you have three railroads basically. You have York Rail, you have Norfolk Southern, and you have CSX. CSX and Norfolk Southern are pretty big, what we call Class 1 railroads. So my railroad in particular covers 26 states, from basically Louisiana all the way up to Chicago, Illinois, and east, all the way up to Maine and down to Florida. So we have about 26,000 miles of track, and we have about 100 special agents for our job, and that includes command staff and things like that. Some people work in the office. But in the Baltimore area, my field office is called the Baltimore Field Office. We cover York, Adams, and Franklin County, Pennsylvania, and we go straight through Maryland, covering DC, Maryland, and parts of Northern Virginia, down to Fredericksburg, Virginia. So at any one time, our guys can get called out to anything from trespassers, somebody breaking into a train, or worse, like a kid gets hurt or something like that on the railroad track. So every day these things are happening. When you could just, Channel 8, you hear it on the news, somebody was struck by a train or a car was struck. And it doesn't really even matter how fast the train is going. I've seen it happen at 5 miles an hour, and I've also seen it happen at 60 miles an hour for the train. But definitely keep in mind that it happens. And what we like to tell people is any time is train time, right? So you may come up to a crossing that doesn't have crossing arms. So when you do that, you should always stop, look and listen, right? You want to listen for the train horn, because most 99% of the train railroad crossings, the train is going to hit the horn. They're going to make noise. You're going to see the lights. You're going to hear the bell. So you may not expect it. You might not see the arms. You might not see the flashing red lights. So that's just always think train whenever you come up to the tracks. All right, trains can't swerve, obviously. Right? They're on the track, but speeds vary. So you might come up to a railroad crossing, and since it's a big object, it looks like it might be going slower than it actually is. In York County, for my railroad and the York Rail, they're smaller. The tracks aren't as used as much. So I venture to say that most of the traffic you're going to see down this way is going to be anywhere from like 25 to 35 miles an hour for freight trains. It's not going to be that fast, but fast enough still to be damaged. Obviously, we see it on the news all the time. All right. One other thing I like to go over here is freight train stopping distance. All right. Sometimes, and this gives you a good idea. Right, a normal car, 200 feet. We have a bus, 230 feet. I know the chief back there, he probably gets involved in a lot of accident reconstruction and stuff like that, and can verify the bus and the train, you know, the bus, the trucks, and the cars. It takes a long time, but a freight train. So here you have a passenger train. They usually can stop just because they're shorter and a lot lighter, right? 600 feet. But the freight trains, and that's what I deal with a lot, takes forever. It can take almost a mile to a mile and a half to stop now. And, you know, some of these trains, you know, in York and Adams County, in Franklin County, they're a little bit longer, but York and Adams County, you make it a train that is like maybe a half mile long, maybe 3,000 feet at the longest. But some places on the main lines in the northeast region, you can have trains that are about anywhere from 10 to 13,000 feet long. So they'll be a couple miles long. If they hit the brakes, it's still taking them that distance, if not longer, to stop. Things like rain, leaves on the tracks, that's gonna make it a lot longer. So when these engineers and these conductors are driving, you know, or operating the train, you know, they may see somebody that far ahead. They could be on a curve, they could be in some area that if they hit the brakes too hard, it could cause more damage. So a lot of times they just slowly hit the brakes. They may have the opportunity to throw it in what we call emergency, which will dump the air and lock the brakes on the entire train, and that will stop it quicker, but it's still going to take about a mile to stop the brakes. Trains are heavy, we know this. Some of the damage that can be done to, you know, we did recently up in New York State near Buffalo. We actually did a demonstration for the Operation Lifesaver where we took a car and ran a freight train while we were all operating drones, and there was 1 million cameras set up. And I mean, even at 25 miles an hour, it will do damage to where the car does end up looking like that, right? It just depends on where it should hit, the kind of damage that it will do to somebody inside. So crossing over the tracks, what I was saying earlier to a couple of folks who were talking about it was most people, you know, yeah, you see the crossing come down, you either try to beat it or you get stuck at it, you know. Sometimes people don't realize when you get stuck in between the crossing lines, this is where a lot of incidents will occur. The arms will come down and somebody will be in between the arms. And they don't realize that you can just drive right through it. They try to back up or sometimes they turn, they go down the tracks. That's how a lot of these things happen. And, you know, it could be an elderly grandparent, right? It could be an inexperienced 16-year-old driver on the phone. It could all these factors will play into that. But, you know, the big thing to know is that you can go through these things, right? They're a lot of times plastic or fiberglass arms that actually break away. They're made to break away. So if you get stuck on it, they're going to crack and break before they do a lot of damage to the car. So this is where I'm going to do a couple more slides here, and then I can get into the police side of things. But if you stall on the railroad tracks, there's something called an emergency notification system sign, and I want to get into that because most people don't realize this blue sign even exists. And what this blue sign, like I said, is called the emergency notification system, NS. Right? The first thing you want to do is if you're actually stuck on the tracks, the car won't move, get out. Get away from the tracks, even if you don't see a train. Locate the blue and white emergency notification system sign, the ENS, and call the number provided on this sign. And that's the big takeaway from today. 800-232-0144 is our public safety communication center. So that phone number, our name of our railroad, and the location is all going to be on any crossing that's owned by CSX. So when we go out and we teach like public safety, we teach dispatchers, we go out to York County 911 for every one of their new classes, and we instruct their dispatchers how to tell somebody on the phone to know where they're at on the railroad tracks. That's huge, right? Because if you call 911 and you don't know exactly where you're at, say you're that 16-year-old kid or that elderly person who may have dementia or whatever, you know, you don't know where you're at. So if they could get them to that blue ENS sign, that gets the railroad the location, whether it be you call 911, give them that location, or you call the 800 number. What calling the 800 number does versus calling 911 is that gets you in contact directly with the railroad. The railroad can get on the radio and get through other dispatching methods to stop that train as quick as it can, versus calling 911, where 911 is going to call that 800 number to stop the train no matter what. So you take that middleman away by calling the 800 number. So, you know, I could give my opinions on how that works. I just think by taking the middleman out of it, calling the 800 number, if you know, is the quickest way to get railroad traffic stopped. In York County, we have a great relationship. As soon as you call 911 and tell them where you're at, they're going to know who to call. But in some places, it's not like that. I've seen it to where they even called the wrong railroad. So it happens. And that's why it's, as a railroad cop, this will segue into what I do as a cop, right? As a railroad special agent. I network with local police departments, federal agencies, state agencies, and my job is to make sure that they understand that what the railroad is, right? That we have unique challenges as far as, you know, people breaking into the trains. That's one thing, right? Crossings is one, but we have a trespassing issue in certain areas. We have dumping, we have homeless people. All these are kind of unique to the railroad. And that's where it's good having your own police department so you can go out and network. And as I said, even do the police work to combat them issues. I'll give you an example of like the police work that we do in Baltimore. So, you know, I am a commissioned police officer in Pennsylvania. I'm Act 120. I have the same police academy as every municipal cop and same certification. The only thing that's different about mine is that I work for the railroad, so I can't stop a car on 83 or stop somebody for speeding unless it has something to do with the railroad, right? Now in Maryland, I'm also commissioned through the Maryland Police Training Commission, and I'm a police officer down there. But say I go to Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, I can with my job. There's a federal law under Title 49 which makes that state give me authority. So I have all rights to enforce anything to do with the railroad and anywhere my railroad owns property. So getting back to like our theft issues, a train will stop for just a couple minutes in Baltimore and people will break into that train, right? It carries UPS, it'll carry FedEx, we carry stuff from McDonald's, we carry tires, we carry beer. Anything you can imagine that's is on the railroad tracks, on the trains. And, you know, GE appliance is a big one for us. So like we'll stop at a siding, and if we're not watching it, we're not flying drones, or the local police departments don't know to go out and help us, they will literally break into it. Organized crime, or sometimes it's just people who, you know, see a chance. There's a UPS symbol on the side of a train, right? So they're going to go up and try to break into it and steal whatever they can. And like I said, that happens daily. A couple of gentlemen here were telling me that they've seen some media articles about, you know, out in Los Angeles, where that's the biggest one over the past few years where it's occurred. But again, that happens in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Memphis on our railroad all the time. So like I said, networking, getting out and talking to people, and then also we do something called RISK, Railroad Investigation and Safety Course, where I go out to police departments, fire departments, dispatch centers, and teach them how to properly investigate railroad incidents. You know, there's a couple differences. It's just basically on how to be safe on the railroad. And you know, our engineers and conductors, it's not actually like operating a vehicle. They're not required to show a driver's license, right? They have a Federal Railroad Administration ID, which is supposed to be their identification. And how it works is they're not technically a vehicle, right, on the road. So that's why they're not required to provide that. It should be treated as an object, the train. So yeah, that's a little bit about, it's about the railroad. You know, trespassing, we have had issues most recently in Baltimore where they, you know, literally built a homeless camp on the railroad tracks, right? So we have to go out and it's dirty. The residents of the area complain, but you also have to remember nowadays that you have to be politically correct. I can't just go out there and like knock all their stuff down anymore. And like, so it's a very delicate process where you want to get, you have to network with the local PDs and see what the vibe is of that area and understand what that local police department is going through with the community and try to work it out so that's a lot about my job, you know, network and things like that. And I've been a canine handler for most of, as I said, 16 years. I've had 3 dogs since working for the railroad. Most recently, I've had canine Shelby, which is my retired guy. He was 12, he just passed away. So going through a lot of trauma, losing the dog, you know, like stuff like that. And prior to that, so I wasn't ready to jump back into the canine unit so quickly, right? And prior to that, I lost my 3-year-old black lab who was an explosives detection canine, and his name was Archie. He was actually put into a boarding facility locally and suffered heat stroke while we were on vacation and died. So that was a tough one for me. It took me about a year to get over that. So, you know, I've been going through that, and I just made the decision to get another dog here in March. So I'm going up to Michigan and going through the Canine Academy. So we work a lot of the presidential, like, inaugurations, State of the Union addresses. Whenever the Secret Service is going to go over the railroad tracks, they'll call and say, hey, can this area be secured? And, you know, we're like the silent, yes, we're going to go out and search that area for explosives and do our best to keep that area safe. So, you know, we might not get the limelight all the time, but we are part of the South Central Pennsylvania Task Force. A lot of the bomb threats that come out, you know, York County Sheriff's Department is who I train with a lot. Lieutenant Godfrey is an ace. He was great. And that's one thing I would want to bring up is if anybody knows the York County Sheriff's Department, when my family was going through that with the dog loss and everything like that, the people that were at my side the entire time even came to the house to make sure I was okay with the York County Sheriff's Department. Great guys, great group of people. So, but you know, so yeah, that's a lot of what we do on the railroad. I'm sure there's some questions. I have a million stories that I can tell you from all types of police work and my military experience and stuff like that. So feel free to ask any questions you have at all. I'll open it up to you guys. Okay. Now the question was that the train car is actually locked. Yes, they are. We have, so there's many methods that they use to break into the rail cars. Most of the ones that you're going to see them break into are what we call trailers on flat cars. So your normal everyday tractor trailer you see there will pull into what we call an intermodal facility. They'll lift it up off the ground, put it on the train car, and transport it cross country, right? That's the green way to transport things. You're not over the road trucking it. So they'll have what we call a cable seal on it. They'll either have like a little seal or like sort of like it's about the thickness of a pen that'll go through it and it bolts on either side. They'll bring bolt cutters, grinders, blow torches. Like, I'm not kidding you, you know what I mean? Like these people are pretty crafty and they'll do whatever they can to get in that within minutes. These crimes are occurring within minutes. Like they'll break into it, they'll throw all the stuff on the ground, pull up in a truck or their car and take it and pretty quickly. They also have something called a warlock, which is like a lock that kind of covers the whole thing. Again, they'll grind that. They might walk by that if they're in a hurry, but they'll use grinders. I've even seen them peel back. They'll go up on top of the rail car and grind away and then just peel back on top. It's sort of like a sardine can. That's rare, but not too rare. Like I've been here 20 years. I've seen it multiple times. So it happens. Any other questions? Yeah.
So in a case like this,
Yeah.
There are limited railroad.
Correct. This is a great question. So Greg was asking if there is other people, like, so we allow other people to operate on our railroad tracks, right? So we have Amtrak that'll operate on our tracks. Norfolk Southern will sometimes come on ours. And so these in York area, as I said, there's York Rail, there's Norfolk Southern, and there's CSX. Them tracks are owned by us, so we can control. So say it is a foreign railroad train operating on our tracks, we still have control of that train, so we can stop it and things like that. So can the other railroads. Correct, 100%. Yeah, usually one of the bigger class ones. With that being said, anybody ever been over by, well, obviously by Dick's Sporting Goods on the east side of the city? I believe it's Springersbury. There's a green locomotive that sits there and says ESPN on it, right? That's a very short line railroad in this area, only has 2 miles of railroad. So that's an example of somebody who generally, they may be switching in between two businesses there, or they may just be a switching locomotive. But they'll come out on the, say, the York Rail, and they'll notify us and things like that. They gotta get clearance, but yeah, yep. Any other questions? Yeah, I got plenty of time, by the way. So. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I'll give it. So earlier you heard me talk about how when I go to different states, Title 49, 27101, I think is what it is. That's interstate authority for railroad police. What that law requires that every class 1 railroad has a police officer. That police officer has to be certified in either the state that they live or work. So for me, I live in Pennsylvania and I have a Pennsylvania certification. I also work here. So my Pennsylvania Act 120 is what it's called. My MOPEC certification gives me authority as a police officer in the state, right? Some states are very like loose, like our guys are regular cops, can go out and stop cars for traffic and all that kind of good stuff. But then there's also places like Maryland that's sort of restricted to just the railroad tracks. So our authority has to do with the railroad. Like I can't go out and run rogue, locking people up or like looking for things like that. But like instances, let's say like Saturday, where there's an active shooting, I'm going, right? I'm a Pennsylvania police officer as well. So if I was home that day, likely I would have responded, just like I would when it happened 2 years ago and they hit the alarm for it. Everybody in the area responds to them kind of things. So we're allowed to do that as well. And that's within our scope and in our authority. Does that answer your question or no? I didn't kind of. Yep. 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 Yes, absolutely. And that's where it's good to have, I can, and I do in Maryland, right? But say I go down to Virginia, I don't know it that good to where I can just sit there and like, you know, I have it all in my car. If it's e-tickets and we're signed up and we can do it online or whatever, it's very easy. But generally what I'll do is I'll have one of the local special agents or a local police department in that area come help me. I would never pawn it off on them. Like I'm not the kind of guy that says, hey, I want this guy locked up. And that's another thing that Title 49 does is it makes that state, their jails take our prisoners too. That's another thing that 1986 when that law came about, sometimes, you know, we weren't getting help from locals and things like that to where we had it written in the law. That's from what I hear from the older guys. I obviously deal with that, but does that answer your question or not? Trying to, yeah. I'll tell you anything. If you give me the right question, it can help, you know. But yeah, sure.
About these stories we hear about where somebody is in Maine, wants to go to Florida, so they walk along the
this is a great question. I hate that I didn't bring this up. So what Bill's talking about is hobo. We get a lot of training, you know, nowadays it's, you know, riding the train, the hobos, right? So I've stopped your guy with the guitar and the bag on his back, right? Like I legit stopped that guy a couple times and, you know, that happens, right? They're your people who are literally, you know, I check everybody for warrants, so I don't care. You know, like, cause these people, they're traveling obviously for, sometimes it's the thrill, sometimes it's the high, you don't know the difference, right? Modern day train hobos, you'll see, you know, they're coming from California, they'll ride east in the summertime, and then they'll come down the East Coast to try to get to Florida. And that's the main route for us. And so, yeah, when in the rail yards and even on the right of way, that's one of the big things we're looking at when trains are going by. They ride, remember I was telling you how they have the rail cars that go up and drop on the car. They'll ride in between the wheels. They'll bring plywood and lay it out. And so basically where they're hanging right over the rails, I don't know, I would never do it, but if it breaks, they'll fall right through. Literally, but yeah, sex trafficking and human trafficking is huge right now. And so that's why one thing we like to do is actually get everybody off the train, talk to them, interview the young females that they're riding with them, you know, because you just don't know. And actually, if you went to CSX.com, you would see a story of a 12-year-old where a couple of our special agents actually worked through a situation somewhat similar to that, where they had a 12-year-old that was involved in human trafficking and stuff like that. So it does happen, and that is one of the main things we're looking for. There's something called Hobo Code, right, which you could also Google search, and That actually, it's wild, like there's certain arrows, there's dots that they use, they'll spray paint things to where other hobos know where to catch the trains at, where to stop. And it's a huge, in Baltimore, up on, in an area called Bayview, that's where they tend to get on, and then you'll see them panhandling and things like that. For us, it's just a matter of going out and trespassing them and either taking them to booking if they don't have ID, writing them a citation. But a lot of times with that, you're wasting your time because it's a summary, right? They're going to get out within 24 hours, and then they're back on the train. And really, what you're doing is just creating judicial waste because the case is going to go nowhere unless they have warrants or they're wanted for something. Generally, it's a warrant. We catch you again, you're going to go to jail. These folks carry this with them too. A lot of times, as a canine handler, right? You see the malnutrition dog with them and things like that. You feel bad for the dog. You try to take care. Do your best for these people you can. How am I doing on time?
You're doing great on
Okay,
time.
cool.
So a lot of times I hear about road projects that are lengthily delayed because they're trying to get permission from the rail company to, what's that all about?
So I can give you a great example of the processes. So that the police department, we kind of we're not really involved too much in that, right? But there are a lot of permits and processes that have to get cleared before we will even, entertain something like that, right? So I know in DC, I worked on something called the Virginia Avenue Tunnel Project, where we ripped up basically we had to get double stack intermittent trains from the south all the way up to the north. There was close clearances to where we had to redo a lot of our tunnels. So there was a lot of permitting processes and things like that have to go on. And fortunately, I was allowed to be on that project where I got to see a lot of the permitting processes. But honestly, to stand up here and try to give a good answer on that, that's well beyond, my capacity and what I do. But I do know that they have a whole department and everything like that down in Jacksonville who will come out and talk to people about it. I wish I could give you more of it, but I do know it's a pain in the butt sometimes.
To this, like that situation, Ohio, right? Sounds like that was.
Right. It is. Anytime that a written train derailment happens, there's a potential hazardous material releases. Fortunately, CSX we have a hazmat and incident response team that will go out. I can't stand up here and tell you that could never happen to us, right? Because it can. But what I will say is our response to these kind of things is very community driven, right? We're pretty proactive in getting out there and obviously doing these kind of things. We have a command post that will come. We have plenty of hazmat people from around the system that will come. We have contractors that within seconds of that happening, we're on the phone with them, getting them dispatched out to that area. So I think that from an optics standpoint there, Norfolk Southern may have missed a good opportunity to prove what Class 1 railroad can do, right? And that's what seems to be going around the industry. I can't sit up here and say that that's CSX's take on that, but I believe that as soon as East Palestine occurred, I happened to be at the 911 center that day, right? I was talking to at the time who the director was, and I was like, that's what we're here for, to stop. Not necessarily stop the incident from happening, but let's come up with a tabletop exercise. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open before these things happen so we know how to handle it. And that's I think the big takeaway.
And talk about it, hazardous materials is the key.
Correct. Yeah. And that's where, we work with the public safety organizations too, to where we even have apps that a fire department can have to pull up, the material data sheet that shows what's on the train, right, at any given time. We don't like to just let that information out arbitrarily just because of the security risks that go with that, right? But if there's a legitimate need, if the community is worried about that going through their area, absolutely will, provide that information if asked. I will say this, right? You always hear about the airline industry, how it's the safest and all that kind of stuff, right? The railroad, you're not dealing with some guy who just got his CDL license 3 days ago driving hazmat road, right? You're dealing with a guy who's obviously been through a few months of training, knows how to operate a train. There's two people on the train. You have an engineer, conductor. You know what I mean? Like when you weigh it, you're not, it's just not some road. I hate to use the word like that, right? You get some guy or random person driving a hazmat load down the street, right? I hope that helps. I can't give all the answers. East Palestine's a touchy subject in the industry, right?
Still be talking about all the private, all kinds of authority going every direction, and next thing you know, communication is gone.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I think we need the proactiveness, right, being set up. That goes in, not so much this slide, but the one that I teach to the risk, how I was talking earlier, how we do an investigation course. That actually touches that big time, to where proactiveness, we have to get out into the community and we have to work with the local responders to understand how to handle a situation like that.
Yeah,
Jim, just give us a second, please.
Yeah.
quick pause to change batteries here.
Yeah. It's a small accident. It's a car. Who takes charge of that? Local police, you, or under the NPS?
So, good question. Whose responsibility as an accident team takes charge, right? And that a lot of factors will go into that. Am I good now?
Yep.
A lot of factors will go into the accident, like the response to just a simple car crash, right? Sometimes our response time might be an hour, right? Just depends on where I'm at in the system. Or do we have, so the local police departments, most of the time end up handling like a simple car crash, train versus car. We'll come out and provide, say Spring-Sperry Township is asking for DVR footage of what happened on the train. I'll come out and I'll open the computer up and pull that up forthwith, or right in front of them if they want to see it. Then we'll provide a link to where they can see the download of the train, see what's on the train, the context and all that kind of good stuff. So in that situations, we become more of an assisting agency than we would be the ones to handle it, right? And is there a lawyer in the room? So when I know, right, so the other thing here is, right, if you're a family member looking from the outside in, who would you rather have handle an incident that involves a fatality? This is where I kind of would draw the line. I'd prefer that a local police department handle any type of fatality, just because of the resources that they have to handle an accident reconstruction and their expertise in that. So anytime it reaches that threshold, I'd like the local police department to handle, or the state, or whoever it is in that area. NTSD is never going to come out for like a train versus a car or anything like that unless there's a derailment. So that's like your thresholds there, right? With that being said, in Baltimore City, I'm not knocking that police department. They're great, they're hardworking, but they just don't have the resources to help all the time. So they'll wait the 2 hours or an hour and a half that it takes, even if we have a guy all the way down in Virginia, they'll wait and just sit with the scene until one of us get there and we'll handle it from start to finish. So it just depends. Like that, the answer to that question depends on the relationship and the availability of who to respond. But, any other questions? I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for your time. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm pretty easy to find. Thank you.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for your service to our country and helping keep us safe in a number of different ways, but your military service is certainly commendable. One thing that we like to do with all of our speakers is we are going to donate a book in your honor to the Logos Academy so that those students have something that they can read. So this is going to go in your honor. I'm going to get you to sign a sheet there that will stick in here and have your presentation. But I think Tim will want to get let's go another round of applause. With that, membership committee and anybody else that wants to stick around here. Are there any other announcements to be made before we end the meeting? If not, very good. Hope everybody has a great week. Thank you, everyone.